The music you listen to says a lot about who you are. In this podcast, we discuss how that music may shape your life. We talk to normal people with a love for music and people that are in the music industry in one form or another. My name is Craig Seibert, and we want to know your music story. Welcome to Music Musing. Welcome back to Music Musing. Special guest today. I have Jon Berkenfield of BerkReviews.com on the line. On the video. I got to get used to this whole video thing. I know that you're kind of not common with it, but I got to get used to this video thing.
Yeah, it's a different experience when you add the video component. It's nice to be able to see the person you're talking to. Although I found, because I'm a teacher, and so I was teaching on Zoom for the last year, and hybrid Zoom. Like I'd have kids in the room, I'd have kids on Zoom, and I have found that I just watch myself on these videos, like instead of the people that are talking. And it's because I'm talking, so I'm like, I guess I should see. There I am. It is a weird habit to break away from.
That is extremely common. In fact, I even set when I'm in we use Adobe Connect, but I even set my video underneath my camera. So when I'm looking at myself, it looks like I'm looking at the camera. I know where you're going with that.
Yeah.
Jon Berkenfield has been a friend for a really long time. A bandmate.
Yeah.
For a long time, a band fan, and then a bandmate for a pretty long time. We'll get to that at some point. But I also know that you have a history of music. You love music just about as much as anybody else, probably a lot more than anybody else in our industry. And I think you have an affection for music, and that's kind of the way that I explain the people that I have in my life that like music. It's not just like it's an affection for it. You like the nuances, you like the little things. Am I correct on that?
I think that's a really great way of describing it. Yeah, I like that. The affection for it. As long as I can remember, music has been a vital part of like my personality. Even after I stopped playing in bands, which is now hitting about 10 years since I last played in a band, but it doesn't feel like that. You know what I mean? Like it's still such a vital part of how I identify with myself. Like there are words that will trigger full lyrics that have to come out of my mouth. Like I can't help it. I wish I was more eclectic. I'm more eclectic now than I was even when we were in a band, and definitely when I was in high school, where music was literally my identity. I like a lot more stuff now, and I often will say, like, I would be so mad at myself if high school me were to meet me now, because high school me would hate my music taste.
You'd probably hate high school you too.
There are some bands that I listened to that I loved when I was in high school. I'm like, why did I like this? I don't understand it.
So I've been trying to end the episodes with a 3 quick hit question, and we'll get to that. And one of those is related to what you just said. So you hold that thought. So, well, actually, I usually start at the beginning. I usually go way back to the beginning and start with that. But since you kind of mentioned that it's been 10 years you've been out, you've been doing something else a lot lately. Why don't you fill me in on what that is?
So movies have always been my other passion. I think pop culture in general is kind of my thing. I go way too deep on all of it. I try to like learn every little detail and facet of the things that I'm interested in. And so movies have been my centerpiece. Partly, I was given the opportunity to teach TV production, and a big part of TV production is filmmaking. And it made me confront a reality that I'd always loved movies. Movies are really, I like to say, my first love. Ever since I saw Ghostbusters in the theater when I was 2 years old, I've loved film, and I love going to the movies. So I've really dedicated myself to learning more about the art, the history of it, and writing reviews about film and cinema in general. In the meantime, I've started several podcasts related to movies, and which I guess everyone does now because the tools are getting easier. Everybody, because when we started podcasting, it was so much equipment, so much investment, and money just for hosting. And now it's like you can literally pretty much do it for free. And if you've got a decent set of like if you're a gamer, you probably have a microphone that's good enough to start. But all of that is centered around my love of film and music being a big part of that too, right? Because without we've done a few episodes in the past where we talk about soundtracks and songs from movies and bands from movies, and all of those things just kind of tie together. I think even Back to the Future, when I was a kid, was one of the first movies that really like triggered my awareness of music, because he's in a band, he plays guitar, you know, he's trying to get to play in the prom. And I remember watching that as a kid, and I got a skateboard after Back to the Future, and I wanted a guitar. It took a few years before I was able to get the guitar, but like um yeah, that's my focus shifted to my career as a teacher, specifically a teacher of cinema, and that was really the driving force for Burke Reviews. Was if I was going to teach it, I wanted to know everything I could about it. So I dedicated myself to expanding my taste, because again, my movie taste was very narrow too. I was very like comedies and action movies, and anything that was sad, I was like, no way, I don't want to watch anything sad. um, I'm very, very different now. My approach to films are substantially more eclectic, and I still enjoy a good stupid action film. I did catch F9 last week. It's
Yeah,
so
talk about
dumb.
that offline.
Yeah, but it's so entertaining, but it's so dumb. But yeah, so that was my big goal, was if I was going to teach it, I wanted to be better at it, and so I've spent the last 7 years now. I think maybe it's 5. I don't know. It's been a long time. Really, really, actively choosing what I watch. I used to be really bad at rewatching the same movie. Like there are some movies I've seen 20, 30 times. I actively now try to always watch something new, which is part of the reason why I do Movie Club with Corey. That's one of the podcasts. Every week we watch something one of us have never seen. So it's almost in a year, we generally watch somewhere between 30 and 50 brand new movies, just doing the podcast. That's not counting anything else I watch, but and it's been great, because I get to see things that I maybe wouldn't have seen otherwise. And like today, we're starting a new month. We're going into July, so our theme for July is biopics. So we're watching biopics that we haven't seen. And I watched Into the Wild this week. That was Corey's pick, but it's been on my radar for a long time. I didn't know much about the guy. I'd heard the story before, but never saw the movie. It's directed by Sean Penn and stars Emile Hirsch, and it's really good. It's a pretty crazy story, but and it's a little long. It's 2.5 hours, but
I started it. I haven't finished it yet, but I started it.
it is one of those two, because I was surprised, because the first 20 minutes like nothing happens, but I was like, 20 minutes went by pretty quick though, because it was like really nothing had happened, and I was like, well, if we're already 20 minutes in, that's a good sign that it's, even with like minimal stuff occurring, I felt like it was moving at a good pace. But yeah, that's been my focus. And I look back at my musical side, and I've proven time and time again that when I put my mind to something, I make things happen that maybe shouldn't happen. And I really think my music path is that, because I have met some amazing musicians, and I'm always like, I really didn't practice enough. Like I was never at the top. I just was so determined to make it happen that I had a lot of success in terms of like local music, and I played a lot of shows, and we did some stuff, and it was almost all just like because I willed it into existence, as opposed to like being really good at it. So
Spoiler: we weren't actually in a band because we were talented. We were in a band because we were having fun.
it was a lot of fun.
It was. Well, let's okay. Pause right there. That's what you've been doing the last 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
Let's start back at the beginning. Now,
Okay.
Music is in a lot of people's lives. A lot of people grew up with music in one way or another, and some of them turned it off, turned it out, didn't listen to it, could care less what their parents listened to. But what's your earliest memory of music? Like, what do you remember either your parents or your family members bringing to the table as far as music?
I'd say there's a few tiers. First album, like vinyl album, I remember owning myself as a kid was the Ghostbusters soundtrack. As noted,
no surprise,
it was my favorite movie, and I would throw it on and I would sing to the top of my lungs. And my mom was into music for sure. I remember like B-52s and stuff like that. And my dad, who I didn't know growing up, but was a rock musician. My mom had met him, so music was just kind of around. And my uncles were both, one was a guitar player, one was a bass player, and they're the ones who really pushed me into some music, which I think when I was like 11, they started taking me to Sam Ash in Tampa. Right.
Oh, wow.
That was like it was a field trip. Like Saturday, we're going to go out to Tampa. We're going to go to Sam Ash. We're going to play instruments for hours. Then we're going to go get food from somewhere. And that was the whole thing. And the whole way there was the Beatles. That was their band,
Really?
and they Beatles. Like, so immediately that was the first band that I was like super aware of. That wasn't rap music, because I also distinctively remember being into like Skilo and I had sadly the Vanilla Ice when I was like in second grade. I had the Vanilla Ice and MC Hammer cassette
A
tapes.
lot of
Like,
people did.
yeah, I mean those were like the first artists, but the Beatles was the first not rap and not current music that like stuff that was MTV was
Yeah.
pumping out, that I remember being initially pushed on me, and then eventually just something I loved. I'm still a big Beatles fan. I hot take, they're good. But um that was, my uncles really pushed that, and they wanted me to be the drummer because they had guitar, they had bass, and my mom was like, "Yeah, you're not getting a drum set. That's just never gonna
Not in
happen."
this house.
So I got a guitar and an amp with headphones. So that was my entry into it. But in fact, one of the guitar playing uncle bought me my first guitar. He got me an acoustic, and then my mom got me an electric guitar, and all centered around the Beatles and those trips to Sam Ash, which was so much fun to me. And even
I
like I still get sad that I don't remember the last time I was in a music store. Like, it's been a
I
while.
so I am we've again we'll get to the part where we've been friends for a while, but
Yeah,
I don't think you've ever told me that you used to go to Sam Ash in Tampa. That's where I
yeah.
bought that multicolored Les Paul that I had.
Oh man,
That's the
yeah.
exact store where I bought that Les Paul.
I mean, they would take me to like I remember we would. They didn't know where we were going at first, and I
Yeah.
think Sam Ash came from up north. My
Yeah.
family was originally from New York before they came to Florida, but I've always been in Florida. Um, and so when they opened one in Tampa, my uncle was like, "We gotta go," and
Yeah.
like we had been to Carlton's once or whatever, which is a
Yeah.
smaller music store. For the listeners who don't know that story, and we'd go to a couple other, like, they were looking for anywhere that had instruments. They just wanted to be able to go in, play, and maybe buy, but they were never. I don't think they were
So
ever actually planning on
before you go
buying.
on, did you go into Green Shift ever?
Maybe, I do not remember. The only one I
Okay.
remember by name is Sam Ash for sure.
Okay. Okay.
But it was like it was a cool kind of bonding with my uncles.
So you said they played instruments. Did they both play in a band together?
That's always, I feel like, yes, but it was one of those bands. Like, I don't think they
Yeah.
ever played a show.
Okay.
They were a little, not necessarily jealous of my dad, but they definitely were always a little envious because my dad was like off on the road, like touring with his
Yeah.
bands, and nobody famous or anything, but he was that type of band. He was going all over the country, playing bars, whatever. And they didn't. And then I was supposed to be the drummer. We started a band, and we had a name. It was Easy to Please
Wow.
because, yeah, and we got that name from me at 11 or 12, looking at a can of Easy Cheese and putting that together. So right away, I was
You're a genius.
I was super bright. And yeah, and at that time, that's when I started to get into rock music, because of them. And like, if I'm gonna play guitar, I can't just listen to rap music. And to be fair though, I haven't talked about this in a long time, but in like third grade, I started to try to be a rapper. Like, that was like,
Okay,
so
that's where I actually was looking for. There had to be something that you had really early. Third
yeah,
grade, huh? Third grade
yeah.
rapper.
Man,
So
I wrote like
let's put this
one
in
verse.
context. We're a
Uh-huh.
little bit different in age, and not
Yes.
gonna just point that out. But what time frame are we looking at? Say at third grade.
So third grade's what, like 8,
Yeah.
right? So like 90,
Okay.
like, so
Proceed.
just past Vanilla Ice being a thing, like
Yes.
Vanilla Ice is starting to fade out. I'm getting into, like, I think Ice Cube. I remember distinctively having the cassette single of Today Is a Good Day, but I don't remember for sure what year that came out. But that was like G Thing was out and Snoop Dogg was starting to become a thing, and I was getting into all of that right before I get into rock music. So I'm going to have a rap group. I have a friend who's like with me, and I think my cousins were going to be backup singers. Like, I had a plan. So even in the early days, I was going to be a musician. Like, that was always on my radar. I didn't have instruments, but I didn't need them with rap because I just would find
True.
beats. That was my
Yeah.
theory. I didn't know how it worked, of course, but that was my thought. And then, so jump ahead a little, I now have a guitar. I'm now more into rock music, and so like I obviously know Nirvana, and but Green Day is the band that I latch onto, and is the first
Interesting. Okay.
album that I own is Green Day Dookie. That my aunt tormented me about the name of the album being
No.
Dookie, just because she would make fun of them, and I would get defensive because they were my band. So I'm like, you can't make fun of Green Day. And she's like, what are they, Green Day PP? And I'm just like, oh my god, losing my mind, like, out of frustration. And but I had all the posters, and that was my band. It was like, it was Green Day and then rap music. That was like my whole like album collection. And then I had a Beatles cassette single that my uncles had made for me, which is like the big songs on it. And I started trying to play. I make a friend because a guitar player who had a crush on my cousin found out he could come to my house where my cousin lived.
Wow.
And or at least that was his hope. What ended up really happening was that he would teach me guitar. And I ended up later in a band with him, but he starts just kind of coming over once a week. He would play with me on guitar. I would watch him and like learn to mirror. That's actually why I'm really good at following a guitar player, because I learned that way. He would play and I would just mimic. And so I started as a guitar player and I really got into it, but I never pushed myself past what he taught me. Basically, he was a lead guitar player. He was teaching me the rhythm parts. So that's what I learned.
Yeah.
And then later I would join several bands with him. And that would be where I would meet a drummer that was in our band.
Yes, Mike.
Yeah. So this guy, I don't want to just name drop in case he doesn't want his name out there, but
Sorry.
no, Mike, I have no problem name dropping.
Okay.
Mike was a part of the whole thing. So I feel like it's more, there's a common bond there, but the guitar player introduced me to Mike, they were already in a band together a couple of times. And we would form several bands over the years of high school. And when that, I think it was like junior year, I fell off. I didn't talk to Mike or the guitar player. I almost said his name for a while. And then I'm freshman in college. I'm living on campus, and my grandma calls me and was like, "Hey, some guy named Mike called and was looking to see if he wanted to play music again." And from there, Mike and I were like pretty much inseparable. We've been in many bands together over the years. Some that did nothing, like we played in our garage or whatever. We a cycle of other guitar players and things. We finally got one band that was looking really solid. I bought a bunch of equipment for everyone in the band on a credit card because I was in college. I was like, yeah, I have credit. Bad decisions, but I ended up inheriting a bass and a bass amp because of that. And after that band fell apart, I had this bass, and I was like, you know what? There's a lot more job opportunities as a bass player than guitar player. I'll switch. And I fell in love with bass. I always liked playing guitar, but I felt much more comfortable as a bass player. Now I look back and I'm like, man, I could have done so much more with the bass. I was more or less a rhythm guitar player on bass, with a few exceptions here and there. But for the most part, I was just kind of doing the same thing I was doing as a guitar player. I didn't use a pick. And that is a thing I have bass players. Put the picks down. And
My wife's going to cheer you for this one, so she'll be in the air for that one.
And I felt that was like my big thing, is like, I don't want to just be a guitar player. My writing felt like a guitar riff more so than not, but I did not use a pick. But yeah, that was kind of the transition, and then that's I guess that kind of gets us to.
Well, I'm going to ask a couple questions. So when
Please.
you were learning guitar, what songs were you learning?
Oh man, so always everybody, I think every guitar player my age, you started with Enter Sandman. It was like the first, like how to show off a riff was like, oh, watch this. And only the main, like the lead riff. You wouldn't even like play the whole song. You just learned that riff. I learned When I Come Around and Basket Case from Green Day, because that was my band.
Of course.
Come As You Are, Nirvana, another like staple, I think, entry level.
Easy guitar. One too to play. So
yeah. And then in 10th grade, I actually had a guitar class at my high school. So they taught us to read music, which I kind of learned. And we learned a lot of like old like riffs. I can't even think of the name of the songs, but like just like random like American songs, and like old songs like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and stuff like that.
The Saints Come Marching In and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of arpeggiation, which I've never been good at, but that was, I know that's your wheelhouse. And I remember though, because it made me feel very old recently. In that class in 10th grade, I learned how to play Damn It from Blink-182, which that's on Dude Ranch, and that just celebrated the 25th anniversary, I think. And I was like, oh no. Like I could do the math and figure it out on my own, but I didn't have to think about it until they like on Instagram, like, hey, it's our anniversary. I'm like, God, I can't believe that. But yeah, I remember like learning that the guitar teacher wasn't teaching us, but like we had brought the riff to class, and it had just been on MTV, and it was like they were starting to become big. who's still one of my favorite bands. I love Blink so much. But yeah, so and then the first song I remember learning to play with the guitar player and the drummer Mike. I'd gone to their house for they were already a band. They were looking for another guitar player. I'm like, I can play, and they're like, you're not that good. I'm like, yeah, it's okay.
I'm playing rhythm. I don't have to be good.
Right. And I learned Blind from Korn.
Oh yeah.
And I'd never heard it. I had never listened to Korn at that point. I'm like, what is this song? And they're like, it's band Korn. I'm like, with the K? I've seen people wear the shirts, but I don't know what that is. And that was what got me into. Actually, this is an important turning point. I was kind of self-governing religious in middle school. Like I was very like, I owe this to Batman. I grew up on Adam West Batman. And I've always been a stickler for rules, and I always attribute it to Batman. You know, you don't break the rules. And so religious morality was rules to me. And so I had somehow, in my 13 years of life, decided that heavy metal music was Satan music. And I had no interest in metal.
Nobody's ever said that or anything.
Right. I don't know where I got it, though, because it wasn't like my family was saying it. Like, it just was in my head.
Yeah.
Maybe from movies, probably from movies. And my friend brought Limp Bizkit to me because he knew I liked rap music. And he was like, and this was $3 Bill, y'all. So this is before Fred had sold out, and when actually Fred had something to say, because totally after this album, he has nothing to say. You can tell. Significant difference. But there's a song on that album called Indigo Flow where he just thanks like everybody he's ever met, basically. Like it's literally just thanking every band who's helped them, his family. But at the end he goes, and God, I love you. And it literally shattered my stereotype of metal music, because this guy was screaming, and God, I love you. And it opened up my eyes to the possibility that just because somebody screamed didn't mean they had evil intentions. Not to say that Fred Durst, again, doesn't maybe have evil intentions, but at the moment, it made me reevaluate my stance on metal music. And so Limp Bizkit was my gateway into Korn, which was my gateway into like Deftones. And then what became my obsession in music for the next 10 years was hard, like heavy metal, new metal. Yes, I know it was, some people had emo.
There is nothing wrong with new metal. Everybody can just sign off this podcast right now if there's a problem with new metal. I don't see anything wrong with it. It was a genre.
Yeah. And for people like me, it was a merging of hip hop and hard rock music, which was perfect for me, because I was transitioning out of it. Obviously Rage had already been around and had opened that door, and obviously there was Run DMC and Aerosmith,
Anthrax, and
yes, Public Enemy.
Yeah, Public Enemy.
Yeah. So like there was stuff there, and Limp Bizkit was that first into it for me. And then Korn, I got into Korn right before the Follow the Leader album came out, and that's where they do a crossover with Ice Cube.
Yep.
They have the Family Values tour that comes from it, so it really just was like I felt welcome into a genre for the first time, really, where I wasn't a white guy trying to misappropriate someone else's culture, and at the same time I wasn't like changing my beliefs in a way that felt contrary. I was never like, I didn't dislike 80s music, but I was definitely not into 80s rock. I was much more into rap at that time. And so new metal was just the perfect, everything coalesced perfectly for me at that time. I was introduced to Limp Bizkit. I just played Blind with this guitar player. Same guitar player introduced me to Limp Bizkit, though, so I do need to give him a lot of credit. He set me down a path. Korn was the reason I became obsessed with Ibanez as a brand, though. That was like Korn was playing 7-string Ibanezes, so I'm like, that's my guitar because I like Korn. And that was my path. I worked at McDonald's. I bought my first Ibanez with the help of a different friend who helped me pay the difference that I didn't have saved up because I forgot to calculate tax. I got like a $300 Ibanez from our local music store, and had a really crappy amp. Like for the longest time, I just had it was like battery powered, even like you could just drop like 60s, and that was what I had. But over time I started getting more, and then as I mentioned, the band that I ended up with the bass equipment, that's when I got my first half stack and stuff like that. But it was it all kind of coalesced with that one guitar player. If he hadn't had a crush on my cousin, who knows? Who knows if I would have ever gotten good enough.
So it seems like you've had a lot of lines crossing in your life with music. You've had, musician uncles who have kind of
Hmm.
brought you into the fold. You had this one guitar player who really was instrumental in kind of shaping your feeling for guitar and
Yeah.
later on being bass. You were playing covers at the time. We're going to move to a
Yeah.
part here where, we talk. I want to talk about originals because I know you were in a couple bands before you were in Contrast as well. But
Yeah.
I'm going to pause for a second and I'm going to take a
Sure.
break on the podcast, and we'll be right back. I love creating a Music Musing podcast. It lets me see how music affects people in different ways. We're always looking for interesting guests, so if you know someone in the music industry or someone who really has a great music-related story, reach out to us at musicmusingfeedback@gmail.com. This podcast is produced out of my pocket, so if you want to help with that process, we also have a Patreon at patreon.com/musicmusing. You can join for as little as $1 a month, and we have some cool behind-the-scenes pictures and stories, and even a sticker. You could even co-host a show idea that you have rolling around in your head. And lastly, please leave us a great review on whatever platform you listen to your podcasts on. It helps us reach out to more people who may enjoy these conversations. Thank you for your time, and back to the Music Musing podcast. So I'm going to start with my side of what Contrast was in a second, but I want to hear what the difference was, what made you change, because there's a lot of cover bands out there. There's a lot of bands out there that go play bars and make a lot of money playing
Hmm.
covers. Playing Beatles, you talked about Beatles, playing a lot of
Yeah.
Beatles tunes. Beatles, Brown Eyed Girl, Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, all those classic old, folk type
Yeah.
songs, or even rock songs, the AC/DC stuff, Led Zeppelin stuff, Aerosmith stuff, and playing covers. What was the change for you to want to start writing music?
So honestly, I always wanted to write.
Oh, okay.
Even when I was the rapper, I had one verse that I still remember at least the first four lines of, because it was just always, I said it way too many times. But I'm a writer. I
Okay.
write reviews now. I was a journalist in high school. I went to school to be a journalist. Um, so I always wrote lyrics. In fact, not long ago, I found a spiral notebook of lyrics from when I was in high school, and it was tell you, cringe is a word that just
I,
does not
I've got those too.
describe it. Yeah, I was like, oh, I was really going through some stuff in high school.
Yes.
But um,
So you've kind of wanted to write all along.
yeah,
So
because even that first band, we covered songs, but we were writing stuff.
okay. So what I guess what held you back for so long? If you were learning with your uncles, or you were,
Mhm.
you're kind of getting into that feel at that point in time, then learning from another guitar player, why was it an instant thing? Did you want to write from the start for real, or was it just more you just need to learn the tool first?
I think it was both. I mean, I was writing stuff like before he was teaching me covers. I was just like playing riffs. I don't think
Okay.
any of it was particularly good. But that I learned some chords and I would strum the chords and I would play them however I
Okay.
could put them together. And then as far as it like going anywhere outside of a garage, that was more of what was holding us back. We were practicing at our drummer's house when we were in like 10th and 11th grade, and we had a neighbor who hated us. He called the cops on us so many times, and we were playing like at like 4 in the afternoon, and we were getting the cops called on us. And so eventually we were. I don't remember if they had to move out because of the cops, or if we were just told we couldn't practice anymore because they were being threatened, like they would lose their lease or whatever. So that band just kind of ended, and I tried for a while to find other musicians, and it was just not knowing anybody who either, if they'd say they could play, they wouldn't have a space where we could play, or I didn't have a car until I was 18, so I didn't have a way to get to the places. I don't know how many times I tore the inside of my Corolla's roof with the drums because we were cramming drum sets into my little car.
Yeah,
And
that's never happened either, right?
yeah, right. But that it took college. Once I had a car, and we started. I mean, we at one point we were playing in my uncle's garage. He let us use that as a practice place. Um, we were playing in a very rundown building at one point that was just like, I don't even know if we were legally allowed to be in it, but we were. And like, so it got to where the desire to be a musician started to influence the way we were making decisions. That
Okay.
in high school just wasn't an option. So
Right.
um, and I think I had a loyalty to Mike that ultimately ended the one of the last bands we were in together. I don't think I should have ever left. I think that band had the potential to go somewhere,
Okay.
and Mike had a disagreement with one of our guitar player, and they kicked him out, and I left with him out of solidarity. And
Hmm.
then I didn't know he was done. When he left, he was like,
Oh.
"Nah, I think I'm done." I was like, "Oh,
Oh, whoops.
uh, if I knew that, I probably would have stayed." But okay, because I assumed we would just
Yeah.
start another band because that's what we'd always done.
Yeah.
And I did do one more band after that with a different drummer. Only the third drummer I'd ever played with, between Josh with Contrast,
Uh,
Mike, and then my last drummer, who was terrific. And I'm glad I got to do that band. I think that band was a lot of fun. Um, but the band before, I just I still listen to the EP we made, and I just think it's great. And I'm like, man, I really it was like the genre that I was into. I think it was with Timmy.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I
And
know. I know what
yeah,
you're talking about.
yeah,
We're sharing an inside story, but yes, I know which band you're talking about. And you're right. There was something to that. There was something.
yeah.
I've listened to that before, and there was something to that it needed to grow, but it was there.
Hmm.
The perfect seed was there.
And I I again, well, I don't think I'm the most talented musician. I am good at other areas, and what I did for that band was keep the singer and the guitar player from killing each other. And when I left, the band eventually imploded, and
Uh, but
I
Rigid
think
came
that
out of that, so
yeah. Oh, but Rigid was great. I
yeah.
really liked Rigid. But Rigid was before though, because that's how I met you.
Yeah, I know. So,
Um, yeah,
okay,
yeah,
so let's circle around back to that. So I've asked kind of the big questions I wanted to ask. I got one more small one to ask before,
sure,
but that can wait for a little bit.
okay,
So at this point in time, I'm going to tell the beginning of my story. I've told this before, but I'm going to be quick about it. I wanted to start a band with Patrick. Patrick was kind of the same way you felt with Mike.
Mike.
We
Yeah,
kind of went to the same place. We left the same place. We played together for quite a long time, wrote a lot of songs, finally picked up a drummer. Josh, you mentioned him a second ago. Amazing drummer, just a fantastic
so good.
timekeeper. Played with an original bass player, JT, who was a pretty good bass player, an amazing bass player, but very unpredictable. And you couldn't really count on him to do the things he needed to do or be where he needed to be. So it was a parting of ways. And at that point in time, um, we started looking for a bass player. Uh, lo and behold, the man that was standing in front of us at a couple of our shows was actually the person that was going to try and come into this band. And I will let John take it from there.
Yeah, we actually, I don't even know if you know this. We met on my birthday,
I,
because it was
wow.
Rigid was playing with you guys at the Brass Mug,
Yep.
and it was my birthday. And so
Did not know that.
afterwards, Timmy and I went and celebrated my birthday, and it was like we had a lot of fun with you guys, because I was actively Rigid's quote unquote manager at that
Yes.
moment. I
Yes.
had my band that I had bought all the equipment for, had broken up. I had met Timmy, and Timmy, I never fully understood what Timmy saw in me, but he took a liking to me that I really needed at that time. Like, I was losing my all my friends from that band. That was like my whole life, and I was really alone. And Timmy really like took me in and was just like always around. And I think he let me be the manager because he felt bad. That was my band that I lost, and it was my friends. We don't have a spot for you in this band, and really, I was not at the caliber at that time to join them,
Oof.
anyways. But
I wasn't at the
um,
caliber to join them either.
and so, but you can manage us, which I really think he did all the managing, and I would just answer the phone. But so I was going to all their shows, and then we met you guys, and a lot of the other bands we played with, they were just in and out. Like, they wouldn't talk to the band or whatever, and we immediately, Timmy and Patrick clicked,
Oh
and
man.
then um
And for those that don't know, Patrick was one of the people that showed up early and left late and talked to
yeah,
everyone.
talk to everyone. and,
Yeah.
and I didn't. Again, if Timmy hadn't been there to facilitate that, I probably wouldn't have even spoke with you guys, because I'm actively an introvert
Yeah.
until I'm comfortable. And then, as you can tell if you're listening to this, I don't shut up once I'm comfortable. It's that transition period. But Timmy's a great icebreaker too. So between the two of them, it was Charisma City. And then we played another show with you guys when I was still managing, and then JT left, and I was
Yep.
just like, by the way, I play bass. And I wasn't sure. I'd auditioned for another band who I was also friends with, out of Orlando who I really liked a lot, and they were really cool. But they had their first bass player was a guitar player turned bass, and they were apprehensive about the same thing because they didn't know if I could bring what they were looking for. And the guy
Yeah.
they got was great, so I don't fault them or anything. In fact, we played a show with them at the Masquerade even. So
Modown?
Lift
Oh,
was
Lift. Yeah. Yes.
yeah. I booked them. We did play with Modown a lot too, but
Yeah.
yeah. And I actually, I auditioned for a few other bands before I met you guys, but as a guitar player, at one point I had a dude pick me up and like drive me to Wauchula. I'm like 17, and they live way away, and they're like 3 or 4 years older than me, and I'm just like, I wasn't good enough then. The dude's name was Marshall Gibson, man. That was his name.
You can't make that up.
And
You've just made this entire podcast for me.
the dude, he was a singer of this band, right? But his name is Marshall Gibson.
Wow.
A few years later, he ends up in a band called Phoenix Morning as their bass player, and they're signed in like heavy hardcore. I mean, like nothing but scream and growl. And I'm like, hey, I know that guy. Like, I spoke to him afterwards, but like they were like signed and touring and stuff.
Wow.
And I'm like, I almost played with that dude in another band, but I mean, I did. I played. They kept me there like the whole day. Like they hung out with me. Like I was like the cool kid kind of thing for the day. Because again, they were all like 3 or 4 years older than me, and they came and did you ever watch Farm Club on US? I think it's not Farm Club. Something Farm. Matt Pinfield hosted it.
No,
it was on USA.
Okay,
and they would do unsigned bands. That's
okay.
Dynamite Hack had the cover of
Yep.
That's where that came from. Was that show? Yes, that was from that show. And I think they had a website for like musicians to like post, like looking for musicians, and I'm pretty sure that's how I met.
Wasn't it called MySpace? Oh, no,
that was a few years later, and no, that was but that did become the thing. But yeah, sorry, not to completely go backwards.
That's what these conversations are about, man. Just weaving in and out.
And there were other bands I tried. I mean, my uncles, again, we tried to play shows, but Rigid was the first like band that I was attached to that was doing stuff, and then we met you. And right away, I mean, we had shows booked, which I was like super. I'm going from having played only parties, like the band that I bought all the equipment for. The only shows we ever played were house parties, and most of those were our house parties, with the exception of like 1 or 2. And to be fair, though, that band did have a girl break her arm in a mosh pit, so like it ebb and flow. It felt like a badge of honor. Like, there was a pit hard enough that someone broke an arm. Pretty cool. But I got to audition for you guys. The audition's a blur to me. I'm trying to remember how many days. I feel like I had to wait a little bit before I found out for sure if I was the guy.
You did, and I don't think we told you this at the time, but it was whether we were going to continue. To be honest with you, we had actually kind of made the decision that you were going to be the right fit for it, because not only did you have connections, which we kind of use you, but you played bass and you were good at it. You might not think you were good at it, but you played the style that we were looking for. But honestly, those 2 or 3 days that we were taking was more for contrast to decide if they were going on. And at the time, Josh was up in limbo on it. Patrick and I were gung-ho. So
Josh would end up leaving the band because, to be fair, it was a pivotal point in his personal life, because they were having a child, and I think there was a second child, I think, at that time. So a lot going on. And the thing is, without giving everyone's age, I was by far the youngest. I was 22. And I know this because the band Contrast and my relationship with my wife now are connected in time. They were weeks within each other. I met my wife before she was my wife, and Contrast about the same time. So like our first show is still our anniversary date. So we I was much younger, but at the same time, I really liked the personalities that Contrast had, and I was it was weird because I think you're the only one I didn't go to Masquerade to get tickets with. Like, I went with Patrick once and I went with Josh once. So like I got these like personal dinner things with those 2 guys early in because we played Masquerade pretty quickly. Like we played Pegasus, and it was like 2 months in we were playing Masquerade, and then I booked us the big show. By sheer like but like I had such a good time like getting to know. And when I went with Josh, we ended up on I-4 for like an extra 2 hours because there was like a really bad accident that it was just like dead gridlock traffic. So it was just like Josh and me, barely know him. He's like 10 years older than me. And I'm just like, I guess
What-
we're gonna talk for a long time. And it was great. Like it was really hard when Josh did leave. Because I really got like I felt like we had something, and
yeah.
I was afraid of losing it again. And that's pretty much my I think my history with music is like I get it, and then it was just like this fear of losing it, and it always went away.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of other things working also as well against us and for us. I mean, we had a lot of things. We had a lot of momentum at that point in time, and I'm speaking from my side of contrast at the time, but we did have a lot of momentum at that time, and there were a couple small things holding us back. And I think one of those things, small things holding us back, was what Josh was so upset about, that he saw that as the stumbling block for our band ultimately, that it was
Mhm.
going to be the stopping point. I'm not going to get into what it was, but
Yeah,
I know that you came into the band, and we did. We started playing some pretty big shows.
yeah,
We opened for national acts. And when you talk to a lot of local bands, there's not too many of them that can say that. They
yeah,
play the local circuit, they play shows, and occasionally one of them will say, "Yeah, we opened for a local band or national band." We opened for not for one of my favorite bands in history of listening to music, and for one of your favorite bands in
yeah.
the history of listening to music.
Within like 6 months of each other, too.
Right. We opened for Seven Mary Three, who was a band that I had been attached to since they first came out. It was a little pre your time, but it was right at the beginning
I
of,
liked them though.
yes, but it was a kind of at the middle of grunge era where it was turning
Hmm.
over into rock at the time. And then
Yeah,
we opened for Nonpoint, who was a very big favorite of both you and Josh for
yeah.
some specific reasons. But we were flowing really well. And
Hmm.
so when you came into this, to the band and to playing music with us, we were kind of solid in most of the stuff we'd written, and you picked it up really quick. But we did start writing after you got into the band. We started
Yeah,
writing some what I think are probably some of the better songs that we wrote towards the end of it. I wrote a lot of very long and drawn out songs. You kind of, when you came into the band, we kind of started pushing the shorter, the more heavier, the more poignant songs, and I really enjoyed that part of the band. What did that feel like for you coming in from the bands you were coming from into something that was a little, for lack of better words, a little more mellow than what you had liked
no,
and what you'd played?
yeah. It was a transition. I liked Creed, and we definitely had a Creed style, and obviously, yeah, you're
Yeah.
a big influence.
Yeah.
Um, but I had not really been in that band. Like the band I formed, the only band that I really want to call a band that was like real, and we had a full thing, and we played the shows or whatever. Even again, they were just parties. It was very Corn influence, right? Like it
Yeah.
was a lot of crunchy guitars, screaming vocals. Where like our singer's vein would be like bulging because he was pushing himself too hard. And so getting into contrast, I wanted to do what you guys were doing and not try to take over, but I also wanted to, bring my tone to it. And um like I really loved Crawlin, which
That's where I was
I
going with that.
yeah, it just it was a real crunchy kind of punk influence riff. Like as far as like to me, when I think punk, it's the four chords like
Yep.
cycling, and that was kind of what it was. And um that's the writing process for me with music too, is always the spaghetti at the wall kind of thing, like throw a bunch of different stuff, and if something clicks, and we'll stick with it, and we'll then you start to like fine tune it and sand it down, and finish it. But I mean, I can't, like, we had that one jam session that Josh and Patrick loved so much, that was just us riffing
Yeah.
for like 20 minutes, and it was great, but we never did anything with it because it was just that, it
Yeah.
was that moment, it was gone. Probably the most jazzy thing I'd ever done in my life, probably, because
Me too.
it's super loose, and but it was fun, and the recording we had of it was great. But at the same time, like, I didn't know what to do with that outside of that moment,
Yeah.
it felt right. But like other times you hit that riff, and you have that similar feel, but it's like, okay, but I can see something. We were writing some really cool stuff towards the end that I was super excited to get to record. That a lot of it, I don't think we ever really got to record some of it.
No.
Um but Crawlin, like, I think that was the most, I feel like everybody put their touch on it, like, the most. I think out of all the songs that we did, even after Josh left and Mike joined, and we were writing stuff with Mike, I think Crawlin felt like I I started it, but Pat definitely, the lyrics were Pat having fun.
Yeah.
Like, you could just hear it, and then everything about that song I just felt like was like all of our influence, there was, if the songs before I joined were contrast with JT, Crawlin was this is contrast with Jon.
Yes.
And like
No, I agree.
and I love that about it, that it wasn't my song, it was our song, and all of us were able to put our touch on it, you know.
You and I'm going to kind of touch on the nuance. We started this conversation with you liking the nuances of music, and one of the nuances that you added was to a song that Patrick and I wrote long before Contrast, called Cosmic Tragedy. And you added a bass line to that that was kind of a, as you mentioned, a guitar riff almost on the bass. Um, but it was the nuance that that song really needed. It's a very Creed
Wow.
song. It's a very Creed-ish song. It's a very go from clean tone to distorted to clean tone and back, and with meaningful lyrics. But I think it was always missing something. It was missing a lead, obviously, because I was not much of a lead player anyways. But that little bass that
I
you
disagree with
added to it really
that.
changed that idea of that song. So not only did you bring something to the band and in writing, but you also brought something to our old stuff and kind of refreshed it as well. And that was the last question I was going to get to is, what's the writing process for you? Do you have to have everyone in the room to write, or is it something where you think you can sit down and write a riff and then play and sing along with it, or put a drum beat to it yourself? Is it something that you feel like you need to have everybody in the room?
I don't think so. I honestly never thought about it. I think a lot of my writing was just me at home.
Really?
As
Okay.
a kid, I definitely like it more as a collaborative process. Partly because I don't know, like I've admitted my taste has changed dramatically, both music and movies. Um, but there's been a lot of times where I will hear something and think that's the best thing that's ever been played, ever, and I need other people to tell me, "Yes, it is," or "No, what are you talking about? That's awful." And so I think I was much more confident writing with the band,
Right.
because I wasn't just me thinking it was great, you know, because I could laugh at a fart joke that I've heard 100 times from Adam Sandler and still laugh at that same joke again. And it's not like a fake laugh; it's like a legitimate, the same amount of energy is coming out of me, even though I knew it was coming. I knew it was going to happen. So having that, the affirmation of other musicians, always felt important. And I've never felt, I'm not formally trained. Like I was shown how to play guitar by someone who
Same here.
took lessons,
Yep.
and even like I've always felt like I think you can listen to a song and play it by ear though, right? Like you can
Yeah.
figure
Oh
out
yeah.
like a riff. I've never been good at that. I've
Oh,
always felt off, and um I often question like if maybe I am like more tone deaf than I ever realized, and just I again I learned the techniques and I can follow along with you, and I get the general things. I still don't understand scales. Like I can play a scale.
hey,
I
guess
don't know
what?
when
I
I'm
don't either.
supposed to use it. Okay, good. I often wonder if it's just like a secret musician's like,
I,
yeah, yeah, scales.
I
Yeah.
am I am that is my next step in guitar for me, is I really want to go back to a school or an instructor and learn how to play scales and learn how to play a lead over top of a rhythm. I'm the same
Yeah.
boat you are. Yeah. So
Yeah.
don't feel bad.
Well, I always thought, I the guys in contrast I was always impressed with in every way. I felt I had a lot to prove. Being so young, especially, I felt, I needed to. Although, to be fair, in all of my other friend groups, I was called Papa John often because I
Because
was the
you're the
father
elder.
figure. Yeah, even if I wasn't, I was the mature
The-
one who was going to make sure they didn't go to jail that night, kind of thing.
Were
So
we talking about Timmy again?
uh, at some points, but not Timmy had pretty much mellowed his party days by the time I joined the band. But like my band previously, all of those guys were, we were 22, so most of them we would drink a lot, but we, responsibly drink, or at least I was.
Yeah,
And
whatever.
yeah, um, so with you guys, I didn't have that. I didn't have to be the dad, like you
Yeah.
guys were all, mature and had jobs, had careers. Like I was just starting my career, but it was like, I was graduating college when I met you guys. I had just graduated when I met you guys.
Yeah.
And, I would become a teacher about a year later, partly because of the band thing. Cause I was like, I
Yeah.
need nights and weekends off. So, hey, teaching.
Teaching's
Um,
great.
yeah. And it took a few years of doing it before I fell in love with teaching. Like I literally was teaching because it gave me the nights and weekends off that I could then go to band practice and have, shows without it being an issue.
Yeah.
Um, and, so contrast was great. I love the writing process, and I love what we were writing. as stressful as I think the recording process is, because that's when I feel like
Whew,
your
that was a long 2
weaknesses,
days.
well, your weaknesses as an individual player, I think, show up.
Oh yeah. Whew.
Because when you're playing together and you make a mistake, like you can just keep playing or you can fix it. But in a recording, well, now it's there to be scrutinized, and you're alone in the headphones and isolating your sound, and you're just like, oh, I'm off key or I'm off tempo, and it's so
Way
much.
different talent. Way different talent playing or recording as it is playing live. Way different
Yeah.
talent.
Um, and I did for a little bit consider trying to be a studio bass player, where like I would just hop in and do the lines, because
Yeah.
I can play other people's stuff or play along with somebody pretty quickly. But recording, it was stressful. Every band that I got to record with, I was always stressed. I think by the last band, which was Fall in the Dark, I was very comfortable with either with those songs, or I just recorded enough that I was like used to it at that point.
Yeah.
But like with Contrast, that was everything was new. Literally everything was new. Playing the very first show I ever played was at Pegasus Lounge with you guys, and I had not learned how to put bass strings on properly. And within the first 3 seconds of the first song, a string popped off. And I did the rookie mistake and was like, "Stop playing!" And you looked at me like, "I will kill you." And um,
I
the
remember that very well.
yeah, yes. I was just thinking about this recently. I think because of asking me to do this, but also, I've been exercising with a longtime friend, a friend I've known since I was like 12 years old. But I forget there was a window from like 2004 until like 2014 that we didn't speak. For no reason. We just lost. He
Yeah.
was going to school and we just didn't talk. And so he knew nothing of my band days. Like he didn't
Oh
experience any of
wow.
it. And he was friends with that first band that I was in before I joined Contrast. So like we were running and I'm like telling him my band history, which now I'll be like, hey, you can listen to it on a podcast. But so I was just like reminiscing, and I was like, dude, I didn't tell you I opened for Nonpoint in like 7 3. He's like, no. I'm like, well, let me talk about that, because still at age almost 40, I will be turning 39 in 2 months, and it's those two shows are still like two of my life highlights. Like when
Dang
I
it.
think of like,
So I end these podcasts. We're getting close to the
oh,
end, anyways, and I end these podcasts with the 3 quick hit questions. And you kind of took one of them, but I'll say it because you didn't actually say anything yet. You told me about those 2 shows and you remember them, but one of the questions is what is your favorite Contrast memory?
oh, so hands down is playing Paranoid War Pigs at the Masquerade for the 7 Mary 3 show, because we start playing that show. We are the opening band. We were supposed to be second, and we end up having to open because
Thanks,
we lost
Josh.
the
Thanks, Josh.
rock paper scissors, right?
Yes.
And when we start playing, there's like 3 people standing on the floor, and you can see people like mulling around by the bars, but there's like 3 people. Song 2, not the Blur song, but song 2 for us, there's like 10 people. People are coming out. I'm like, oh, cool, they're vibing with us. By the 4th song, we have a crowd.
Yeah.
And I'm losing my mind. I'm like, holy crap, this is like my 3rd show or something like that. And we have like 40-50 people who are all of a sudden like into us.
Yeah.
When we start Paranoid War Pigs and the crowd is now singing with us because they know this song, and Patrick, it's just the vibe of the whole band. Like we're all so excited, so pumped. We now have a crowd. Like it is from the stage to the back of the rail.
There was
packed.
at least 300 people or more standing in front of us when we played that song.
And then singing with us, singing it back to us. So it
Loud
was
at
just
the
like
top of their
this.
lungs.
And to this day, my biggest regret is in the same moment, because not once did we ever say we were local and that we played in shows out in Tampa all the time. Nobody knew who we were, so they didn't know that, hey, you can come see us again, because clearly you like us. But we were so into the moment, we didn't think, hey, we should promote the band. Like it would be a good idea.
That's your most favorite and your least favorite moment.
Yeah, because I'm always like, it was. I will never get that feeling again of that many people reciting something that we were doing. You know, like
Yeah.
just that, and then at the same time going, but we sure dropped the ball. Like, why didn't we say anything?
Wow.
We would play many, many more
Yeah,
shows and
we
have
did.
never have that. Even with Nonpoint, we didn't have that big a crowd, because
Yeah.
by comparison, 7 Mary 3 and Nonpoint
Yeah.
at that time, especially, way more people were in the 7 Mary 3.
It was just more of a history thing though, too, because 7 Mary 3 had been
Yes.
around for quite a long time. But
And from that general area, like I
yeah,
think
true.
their
Orlando.
studio was in that area.
Yeah,
so,
they were from Orlando. So
yeah.
okay, so question 2: 5-string or 4-string, and why?
After many years of pushing the 5-string, I am a 4-string bass player.
Really?
Yeah, 5-string was because of Korn.
Yeah.
Um, and I felt an adamant desire to like have that lower string. And then when I finally stopped pushing for the 5 string, and I think the Schecter was my first 4 string.
Okay.
I just was like, why did I have the 5th string? Like
You
it
never
never
need it.
really added. Yeah, you never, because if you're tuning that low, it's helpful. But for what we were doing, it wasn't. And then every band after that, we were mostly the lowest any band I was in consistently tuned was drop D. Like, and
Yeah,
that's
right.
not low, So
Well, we're tuned
it,
down half a step, but
half
yeah.
a step.
Yep.
But I mean, it's still not the Korn, like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
muddy,
3
the
steps
strings are
down.
barely on. Yeah, like it's like, how can we just tape the strings to the guitar and like play it that way? Because like it just sounds fine.
So the last one is an assumption, sort of, knowing your history of music and the things that you've talked about in the past and stuff. Limp Bizkit or Pearl Jam?
Limp Bizkit, 100%. Oh man. So I mentioned, I think it was off. It might have been today. I mentioned Into the Wild.
Yes, you did.
We recorded
Yeah.
30 within the first 20 minutes. I hear the soundtrack kick in, and I'm like, is this Eddie Vedder? And sure enough, Eddie Vedder does the
Yes.
score. And I'm like, oh god. And I don't know why. I do this with films too. I tend to take a hard stance when so many people seem to be in a consensus that I don't agree with. Like, I didn't love Pearl Jam. I actively dislike them now because I feel like I'm constantly having to argue with people who are like, "Oh, Pearl Jam's the best grunge band." I'm like, no, they're not. Alice in Chains is way better, and I am a Nirvana stickler. I know,
I know you're not going to get
yeah.
an argument on me. They're all equal for me, but I definitely don't put Pearl Jam as high as a lot of people do.
So when I think of the big five grunge, it's Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots, Pearl Jam.
Yep.
I like Pearl Jam the least of those
Okay,
five.
so let me ask the question again: Limp Bizkit or Korn?
Ah, I think so. Korn has more material,
Okay,
right? Like, and they're still actively making music.
true.
The downside is it sounds like Jonathan Davis is still writing the same songs he wrote,
Yeah,
and I'm like,
I thought that on the last album. Yeah.
right. I'm like, you have to have gone through some change in your life, right? Like, are you just writing this because that's what you expect your fans to want from you? Or are you still going through the same stuff? Because like, that's not okay,
Yeah,
man.
you need
Like,
to go to see a therapist is what you need
for
to
real.
do.
And like, where Biscuit, I think $3 Bill Y'all is a perfect album. I
Yeah.
think every song on that album is fantastic. I think the I can't even remember the name of the second album. See if it I can't remember what it's called. The second album is good,
Yes.
but you hear the fame getting to him
Yeah.
immediately,
Yep.
and then the stupid lyrics start with like Nookie being the prime example of what stupid lyrics can be. With you can take that cookie
Yeah.
and stick it.
Yeah.
What
What?
cookie?
Where did this come from?
And then it progressively gets worse. I would say that the Chocolate Starfish is arguably a pretty trash album overall. There's catchy songs on it, but it's like Fast and the Furious level songs, right? Like, it's like
Wow.
they're engaging, entertaining, but ultimately they're stupid.
That is the best analogy I've ever heard of Limp
Movies and
Bizkit's.
music.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay.
They then lose Wes Borland,
Yes.
who Wes Borland does a solo album with a band called Blacklight Burns, where he is the vocalist that not
Interesting.
enough people have heard. It's fantastic. That
I'll be
album
looking that up.
is amazing. They did a cover album as Blacklight Burns after the first album, which is also really cool, but it's weird. And then Wes, they do the Green album is what I'm going to call it, which has a couple of good songs. They did the cover of Behind Blue Eyes, which is
Yeah.
Fred's not a singer. He tries, but he's not. Then they do a very short LP where they sound more like Rage Against the Machine than they do Limp Bizkit, and it's fine, but it's clearly like they've lost something. And their last album was Gold Cobra, and there's a song on there called Douchebag, which is worth listening to, mainly because again, it's that stupid, like, it's very catchy.
It's Fast and Furious, right?
Yeah, and
Exactly.
then there's a Shark Attack song, which is really the whole album's worth listening to. It's bad, but if you like Limp Bizkit, it's better than a couple of the other
Okay.
things. It's still ultimately Fred not knowing what to say. Korn, I have a hard time really getting into them now. Where I love them, and I think if this question 10 years ago, I easily say Korn. I think consistently, I think their albums were better up until maybe after probably the Twisted Transistor album, whatever album that was. I think that's when they started to drop off. But
Yeah.
now I don't, a lot of that music I don't love. Like I don't really like most of the Disturbed albums anymore. I still think The Sickness is really good, but like after that I don't like a lot of their stuff. Godsmack I can't stand at all
All
anymore.
formulaic. They just all became formulaic after the first couple albums.
Yeah, and but I can listen to $3 Bill Y'all any day. I
That's
still think that
nostalgia.
album,
That's nostalgia,
yeah,
man. Come on.
it might be, but I do have for my my workout, I have a playlist that has a lot of like new metal, but also like Slipknot and Five Finger Death Punch, which you know they're, I think those bands have elevated each album where they don't feel like they're doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's, I think formulaic is real key. And Nonpoint, who did become my favorite band, they've had so many issues with like labels, and then they've had a lot of the only two original members are the drummer and the singer, and like everyone else has rotated out a few times at this
Yeah.
point. And their last album was, I did not like,
Bad.
and I was really disappointed because I've always thought Elias's lyrics were so like real and different too. Like it's not like, because Jonathan Davis's lyrics felt real when I was in high school, because I felt like, oh, this guy gets it, the world's
Yeah.
crap and everything's hard. And it's like now I listen to it, I'm like, I'm 39 now and I don't feel that way, and you're still singing the same thing. Like I mean, life is hard, but I just like, I don't know, I don't whine about it the same way. Like I just try to like,
Hey, dude, you've made a lot of money since you
yeah,
were angry.
yeah.
That should be making you a little bit happy. I mean, I know it can't buy happiness, but it should put you in a little better mood.
But yeah, I would have to, I think if I had to pick, I would rather listen to $3 Bill Y'all than the Corn stuff, because even
Wow.
it's, I find a lot of it to be more fun
Yeah,
than a lot of the Corn stuff,
that's
because
missing.
some of the Corn stuff is heavy.
Yeah, that's missing in a lot of rock today. It's so serious and so either down in the hole or way too high and not
Which
fun.
I want to plug an artist who
Sure.
is not local, but I just feel like I have no one to talk to about this artist, and I love her so much. Her name is K Flay. It's K.Flay, Flay.
Okay.
I've sent you a couple of her things because she
You
did a
have.
cover album. I think she's brilliant. Like she raps, but she sings, and she has a very distinct style. She just dropped a new EP. One song she did with Tom Morello is playing guitar, so it's got a very raged riff to it.
Yep.
She did a song with Travis Barker, but that's really not saying anything anymore because he just seems to
I know
drum
he's just
for
playing
everybody.
with everybody. Machine Gun Kelly,
Yeah,
pick your pick.
dude's on like everybody's albums now. Everyone's got it, or at least there's a Travis Barker remix of
Yeah,
every song.
exactly.
Which he's a great drummer, so I'm
Yeah.
not complaining. It's just like, okay, cool, K-Play got that too, I guess. And then she did something with one more person that's not going to come to me, but she's also connected to an artist named Grandson that I really like a lot. But I found her through Grandson because they did a song called Peaches on one of his EPs, and then I've just become like, I am all in on K Flay. I just think she's brilliant. Her songs are really interesting. She has just this kind of there's fun, but there's also thought. Like the lyrics have meaning and are often very poignant, but at the same time, there's a fun like up tempo vibe about it that I just really really get into. And she's got a pretty extensive catalog actually. She's had an EP last year, an EP this year, and a cover album in between, both 5-song EPs and with a 3-song cover album. And then she's got several like full length albums that were out prior. And people need to check her out. I think she's great. And
I will definitely link to her in the notes because you like I said, you've sent me a couple of them. You sent me both the Travis Barker one and the Morello one, both, and
yeah.
I found them engaging. They weren't over the top. They weren't something like I felt like she was trying to just have somebody in behind her to make it be something big. I felt like there was some genuineness behind it, and I really did like it as well. So yeah, I'll put that in the list.
And to final Corn Limp Bizkit question, I was really into pop punk, but I always like kind of had that as like a dark secret because in the high school vibe where metal was my image, I was new rock. I wore all black. I didn't wear Jinkos because I couldn't afford Jinkos, but everyone I hung out with wore Jinkos. You couldn't really like pop punk and be in that group. So like I liked it, but I kind of kept it on the down low, or I would like make fun of the emo bands at the time, even though I kind of liked some of the emo music. And so I was very much, I always reference High Fidelity when I'm talking about this because there's a scene where they're like, you're such elitist. And I was like, that was totally me. I was a music elitist. Everyone else's music taste was wrong. Like last year I listened to like my top 5 albums from last year were Taylor Swift's, both of her albums. I listened to way too many times. I was really into both of those albums. I loved the Machine Gun Kelly album. Actually,
it was actually really good. That's
I
one I
was
did
so
listen
thrown.
to. Yeah.
I was like, a graduate of mine who I've stayed in contact with was like, "Hey, you gotta listen to Machine Gun Kelly." I'm like, I don't like Machine Gun Kelly. I grew up, I was an Eminem fan, so like immediately when they got the feud, I'm like, I hate that guy. But I was like totally floored. I thought it was a really great album. Surprised. Grandson had an album come out last year that is fantastic. I just think that dude also, he has a very unique voice. So if you don't like his voice, you're not gonna like his music. But I love his voice. And then there was one other, well, in K-Flay's EP, but there was something else that I was like, my old me would never have actively admitted to listening to some of this stuff. And I still don't listen to everything, but I'm much more open to things than I was. And I encourage all musicians and all music people, give it a chance. Even if you like, I do this with my students all the time. I'll have students tell me they don't like certain genres of like, we're going to watch a musical. And I hate musicals. I'm like, no,
give it a second.
You hate all the musicals you've seen. There is a musical that exists that will speak to you. We just have to find it. And I think that's true of, see, there's a movie and there's a, like, I don't love country music, but there are country songs that I do like.
Old country for me, but yeah.
Johnny Cash, hands down, and will always back. I'm a big fan. But even modern country, again, most of the time, can't stand it. But there's always the one exception. And I think we need to be more open to the possibility of exceptions. Like, I
agree.
Yeah, don't discredit a whole genre because you're probably right. You probably won't like all of it, but there could be that one song that will open your eyes to the possibilities. And
Billie Eilish did that to me. She performed on one of the shows a couple of years ago or a year ago or so, doing a piano song and playing with, I think it might have been solos. It was a solo or with a brother, but blew me away. I mean, I heard her name, listened to some of her music, and I'm like, this is crap. She came on that show, and my wife was watching it, and I sat down and listened to it. I'm like, oh my, this is amazing. She hit me. And you're right. That's exactly what you're saying, is give it a chance occasionally. So, but yeah, are you saying that you liked Good Charlotte?
Less than most of the other bands. I didn't dislike them as much as people were like really hating on them, and I think their music gets progressively worse.
Yeah, it does. It becomes way more pop than it is rock. So.
Yeah, like I have like pop punk playlists, like that'll turn into stations or whatever, and I end up they end up on those stations way too quickly, and I'm like, okay, got to skip some of this. Like I don't mind 1 or 2 songs, but then like everything else, I'm like, oh, this is not good.
I've got a list like that too, and it does turn, and inevitably that I Don't Want to Be in Love will come on, and I'm like, fast forward, I cannot do this song anymore.
But, like, I've been trying to listen to more punk that I skip. Like I was aware of like Goldfinger and Less Than Jake, but I never had access to those albums back when we were in high school. You had to own the album to listen to it, not just have access to everything ever, which is a whole other problem, right? Like I find myself listening to the same like 7 albums because I don't know what I want to listen to, but I know I want to listen to that one because I've listened to that one recently, so I'll just listen to that one again. I don't know if you've watched the Bo Burnham special, Inside.
Not yet. It's on my list.
Dude, that soundtrack is insane. Like I've listened to that. He's got a Weird Al vibe. It's like a morose Weird Al. That's
I'm familiar with him. I just haven't listened to that one yet. So
it's freaking brilliant. Very dark, but very brilliant.
We're gonna sit here and talk all night if I don't actually bring it to an end. I would love to do that. In fact, we might even do that afterwards, but I don't want to terrorize the people that are listening. But what do you do, and how do we find you?
So I watch a bunch of movies and I write reviews and I do a bunch of podcasts about movies, all at berkreviews.com. That's BERK reviews.com. And you can find our podcast at, if you search Berk Reviews Movie Club and the Bloody Awesome Movie Podcast I do with the guy named Matt Hudson from whatIwatchtonight.co.uk. That's his website. Does the exact same thing that I do, but just over on the other side of the Atlantic. So we have if you want to find something 5 hours before we do, he's the guy.
Jon, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on. Love these conversations. We've got a good history of it anyways, and just having the good conversation of your history was perfect. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on.
Not a problem. Catch you later, bud.
Later.
Thank you for choosing Music Musing. We hope this story not only gave you a little insight to what music means to someone, but it may also change how music fits into your life. So be sure and drop us a line at musicmusingfeedback@gmail.com and let us know your music story.